You know that moment when you think you've hit rock bottom, and then life decides to hand you a shovel? That's exactly what happened to me at my sister's wedding. I'm standing there in my bridesmaid dress, watching everyone pair off for the reception, when a Marine colonel approaches me and says something that changes everything. "General Davis, let me tell you how a wedding invitation without a +1 led to the most unexpected night of my life. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss." The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, cream-colored with my sister Rebecca's perfectly scripted handwriting across the front. I'd been expecting it for months. Rebecca had been planning this wedding since she got engaged to Marcus last spring. What I wasn't expecting was the singular name on the invitation, Miss Samantha Davis. No and guest. No +1, just me. I stared at that invitation for a solid 5 minutes, sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee growing cold. It shouldn't have stung as much as it did. After all, I'd been single for 8 months since my breakup with David, and it wasn't like I had someone specific in mind to bring anyway. But somehow, seeing my name standing alone on that elegant cardstock felt like a neon sign flashing "single" in bright, embarrassing letters. Rebecca called that afternoon, her voice bright with wedding excitement. "Did you get the invitation? I'm so excited you'll be my maid of honor. The dress fittings are next weekend, and I have so many ideas for the bachelorette party." "Becca," I interrupted gently, "about the invitation, there's no +1?" A pause. Then that careful tone she used when she was about to say something she knew I wouldn't like. "Well, Sam, you're not really seeing anyone right now, and Marcus and I are trying to keep the guest count down. You understand, right? It's just family and close friends." I wanted to point out that Marcus's college roommate from freshman year apparently made the cut, along with his girlfriend of 3 months, but I bit my tongue. "Of course, it's your day. You're the best, Sammy. Besides, you'll be so busy with maid of honor duties, you won't even notice." But I did notice. Over the next 3 months, as wedding preparations consumed our family's every conversation, I noticed plenty. I noticed how Rebecca assumed I'd handle all the bridesmaid coordination, because I had the most free time. I noticed how our mother kept making little comments about how maybe Sam will meet someone nice at the wedding. I noticed how everyone seemed to view my singleness as either a convenience for them or a problem to be solved. The dress fittings were torture. Standing there in powder blue silk while the seamstress pinned and tucked, listening to the other bridesmaids, all coupled up, all bringing dates, chatter about their +1s. Sarah was bringing her husband of 5 years. Jessica was bringing her new boyfriend she was totally in love with. Even our cousin Emma, who was 19 and barely out of high school, had a +1. "What about you, Sam?" Jessica asked during one particularly chatty fitting session. "Anyone special these days?" "Flying solo," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Someone has to keep an eye on you ladies and make sure you don't cause too much trouble." They laughed, but I caught the quick glances they exchanged, the kind that said, "Poor Sam," without actually saying it. The bachelorette party was worse. 8 women in matching shirts stumbling through downtown Austin, and somehow every conversation circled back to relationships. Sarah talked about her husband's promotion. Jessica gushed about her boyfriend's surprise weekend trip proposal plan. Emma complained about her high school boyfriend being, quote, "so immature." Even the conversations that started about other topics, career, hobbies, travel, inevitably wound their way back to how their partners fit into those plans. I found myself nodding and smiling and asking the right questions, playing the role of the supportive friend while feeling increasingly like an observer rather than a participant. When we finally made it back to the hotel, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I'd become the supporting character in everyone else's love story. The week before the wedding, Rebecca had a meltdown. Not about the flowers or the catering or any of the usual bride anxieties. She was sitting in my living room surrounded by seating charts and place cards, tears streaming down her face. "I don't think I can do this, Sam." My heart stopped. "What do you mean? Are you having second thoughts about Marcus?" "No, not about Marcus. About all of this." She gestured wildly at the wedding planning chaos around us. The wedding, the expectations, the performance of it all. "Do you know Aunt Margaret asked me 3 times this week when Marcus and I are planning to have kids? We're not even married yet. And Mom keeps making comments about the cost of everything. And Marcus's mother has opinions about literally every single decision we make. I sat down beside her, handed her a tissue. Becca, you don't have to please everyone. This is supposed to be about you and Marcus. But that's just it. It doesn't feel like it's about us anymore. It feels like it's about everyone else's idea of what our wedding should be. Like we're performing happiness for an audience instead of actually being happy. It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in months. For a moment, I saw past the bride-to-be facade to my little sister who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. Do you want to call it off? I asked quietly. She shook her head. No, I love Marcus. I want to marry him. I wish we could skip all this and just be married, without all the production. But you've wanted a big wedding since we were kids. Remember when you used to make me play groom because you didn't want to wait for a real one? She laughed, wiping her eyes. I was 8. I also wanted to be a mermaid when I grew up. We spent the rest of the evening reorganizing the seating chart and talking about everything except weddings. For the first time in months, it felt like we were just sisters again, not bride and maid of honor playing our assigned roles. The rehearsal dinner was held at Marcus's family's country club, all mahogany and crystal and hushed conversations. I sat at the head table, the only single person among a sea of couples, making small talk with Marcus's grandmother about her garden club, while trying not to feel like a charity case. During the toasts, Marcus's best friend Jake told the story of how Marcus and Rebecca met at a coffee shop where Marcus spilled his latte all over Rebecca's laptop. And that, Jake concluded, raising his glass, is how we learned that sometimes the best things in life come from beautiful disasters. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses, and I found myself thinking about my own beautiful disasters. Like the time I got lost hiking in Colorado and ended up discovering the most incredible hidden waterfall. Or when I missed my flight to a conference and ended up sitting next to a woman on the next flight who became one of my closest friends. Maybe there was something to be said for unexpected detours. After dinner, as everyone mingled on the club's terrace, I stepped outside for some air. The October evening was perfect. Crisp, but not cold, with just enough breeze to rustle the leaves. I was standing by the garden, enjoying a moment of quiet, when Rebecca appeared beside me. You okay? She asked. You seemed a little quiet tonight. Just thinking, I said. Tomorrow's the big day, you ready? She nodded, then hesitated. Sam, I'm sorry about the +1 thing. I know I said it was about numbers, but honestly, I was being selfish. I wanted all the attention on Marcus and me, and I thought having you there with a date might, I don't know, take away from that somehow. I looked at her, surprised by the admission. Becca, I know it was stupid, and I know it probably hurt your feelings, even though you're too nice to say so. You're always taking care of everyone else, and I took advantage of that. For a moment I considered telling her how I really felt, about feeling invisible and forgotten and like my singleness was somehow shameful. But looking at her face, seeing the genuine regret there, I realized something. This wedding wasn't really about me at all. It was about her and Marcus starting their life together. And maybe it was okay that I was just supporting that, instead of being the center of attention. It's okay, I said, and for the first time in months, I actually meant it. Tomorrow is about you and Marcus. That's how it should be. She hugged me tight. I love you, Sammy. Thank you for being the best sister and the best maid of honor anyone could ask for. Standing there in the garden, holding my sister and looking up at the stars, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe going to this wedding alone wasn't a punishment or a statement about my worth. Maybe it was just what it was. One night, one event, one moment in a much larger story that was still being written. I had no idea how right I was about that. The morning of Rebecca's wedding dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that makes you want to crawl back under the covers and pretend the day isn't happening. But by the time I arrived at the bridal suite at 7 a.m., coffee in hand and emergency kit packed, the clouds had started to break apart, letting through tentative fingers of sunlight. The suite was chaos. Rebecca sat in the middle of it, all in her robe, hair in curlers, while 3 bridesmaids, 2 mothers, a makeup artist, and a hairstylist all talked at once. The air smelled like hairspray and anxiety. Sam, thank God, Rebecca breathed when she saw me. Mom and Mrs. Henderson are fighting about the timeline. Sarah can't get her zipper up, and the makeup artist says the lighting in here is all wrong. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. I set down my coffee and surveyed the scene. This was what I was good at: crisis management, problem solving, making things work when they were falling apart. Okay, everyone. Deep breaths. We have 4 hours before ceremony time, which is plenty. Mrs. Henderson, could you help Sarah with her zipper? Mom, why don't you double-check that the bouquets are ready? Makeup artist. I'm sorry, what's your name? Jenna. Jenna, what do you need for better lighting? Within 20 minutes, I had Mrs. Henderson and my mother working together. Instead of against each other, Jenna sat up by the big window with her ring light, and Rebecca looking considerably less panicked. This was my element. Not the romance or the fairy tale, but the logistics, the coordination, the making sure everything ran smoothly so other people could have their perfect moments. The transformation was remarkable. Over the next 3 hours, I watched Rebecca change from my anxious little sister into a radiant bride. The dress, ivory silk with delicate beading that caught the light just right, fit her like it was made specifically for her body, which, I supposed, it was. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist with small pearl pins that had belonged to our grandmother. The makeup was flawless but natural, enhancing her features rather than masking them. But what really transformed her was something that happened around 11 o'clock. We were all getting dressed when Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and broke into the biggest smile I'd seen from her in weeks. "What is it?" I asked, stepping into my bridesmaid dress. "Marcus," she said, holding up the phone. "He sent me a picture of his socks." I looked at the screen. Marcus was wearing bright purple socks covered in tiny tacos. "I gave them to him last week," Rebecca explained, laughing. "I told him he had to wear something fun under all that formal wear to remind him not to take everything so seriously." And just like that, she relaxed. The bride's performance fell away, and she was just Rebecca again. My sister, who bought her fiancé ridiculous socks and found joy in the small silly things. She spent the rest of the morning with this quiet glow about her, like she was carrying a secret that made her happy. The ceremony was held at the historic mansion at Judges Hill, all limestone and oak trees and hill country views. As we lined up for the processional, I felt that familiar flutter of pre-performance nerves. Not performing in a fake way, but the awareness that for the next hour I was playing a role: maid of honor, supportive sister, everything is perfect smile. Walking down that aisle, I scanned the crowd automatically. Family in the front rows, college friends in the middle, work colleagues toward the back. A sea of coupled-up guests, all dressed in their wedding best, all ready to witness Rebecca and Marcus promise their lives to each other. And then I saw him. He was sitting in the third row on the groom's side, and something about him made me do a double take. Maybe it was the way he sat, perfectly straight but relaxed, like someone accustomed to formal events but comfortable in his own skin. Maybe it was the fact that he was alone, the only other solo attendee I could spot in the sea of pairs. Or maybe it was just that when our eyes met for a brief second as I walked past, he smiled. Not the polite, generic wedding smile most guests wear, but something warmer, more genuine. I filed the observation away and focused on my duties. Hold Rebecca's bouquet during the vows. Straighten her train when she turns. Hand over the rings at the right moment. Smile supportively while trying not to cry at the look on her face when Marcus recited the vows he'd written himself. "Rebecca," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "you make me braver than I thought I could be. Not because you push me, but because you see the best parts of me even when I can't see them myself. I promise to love you through all our beautiful disasters, to laugh with you when things go wrong, and to never ever spill coffee on your laptop again." The crowd laughed, and Rebecca wiped away a tear. "Marcus, you taught me that love isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into your plans. It's about finding someone who makes you excited to rewrite all your plans together. I promise to be your partner in every adventure, your comfort in every storm, and your reminder that life is meant to be enjoyed, not just endured." When they kissed, the whole crowd erupted in applause and cheers. I found myself genuinely tearing up, not from the romance of it all, but from seeing my sister so completely, radiantly happy. This was what love looked like. Not the Instagram perfect moments or the grand gestures, but two people choosing each other and meaning it. The cocktail hour was held on the mansion's back terrace, with string lights beginning to twinkle as the sun started to set. I made my rounds, checking on elderly relatives, making sure the photographers got all the family combinations Rebecca had requested, and generally being the point person for anything that needed handling. I was standing near the bar, taking a rare moment to breathe and people watch, when I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me, are you the maid of honor?" I turned around, and there he was, the man from the ceremony. Up close, I could see he was probably in his early 40s, with graying temples and laugh lines around his eyes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing his suit, like someone comfortable with formal occasions. "Guilty as charged," I said. "Are you looking for Rebecca? She's doing photos with the family right now, but they should be done soon." "Actually, I was looking for you. I'm Colonel James Mitchell. I served with Marcus in Afghanistan." He extended his hand, and I shook it, noting the firm grip and the way he looked directly at me when he spoke. "Samantha Davis, it's nice to meet you, Colonel." "James, please. Marcus told me to find his wife's sister and make sure she knew she had someone to talk to if she needed a break from wedding duties." I felt a flush of gratitude toward Marcus. "That's very thoughtful, both of you. He said you've been handling everything for months, and that you deserve to actually enjoy the party." James glanced around the terrace. "Though, from what I've observed, you seem to be working even now." I followed his gaze and realized he was right. Even while talking to him, I'd been unconsciously monitoring the crowd, checking that drinks were being refreshed and conversations were flowing smoothly. "Occupational hazard," I admitted. "I'm a project manager in my day job. It's hard to turn off the logistics brain." "What kind of projects?" "Healthcare technology implementations. Basically, I help hospitals and clinics upgrade their computer systems without losing patient data or shutting down operations." His eyebrows went up. "That sounds complicated." "It is, but I love puzzles, and I love fixing things that are broken. Plus, there's something satisfying about making processes work better for people who are trying to help other people." We talked for another few minutes about work, about the military, about the wedding. There was something easy about the conversation. No awkward pauses, no feeling like I had to perform or be entertaining. James asked thoughtful questions and listened to the answers. When the dinner bell rang, he walked with me toward the dining room. "I hope you don't mind," he said as we reached the head table, "but I may have committed a small breach of protocol." "What do you mean?" He pointed to the seating chart, where I could see my name at the head table and his name at table 6. "I asked Marcus if I could switch seats with someone at your table. Told him I wanted to make sure someone was keeping an eye on the maid of honor, making sure she got to eat instead of just taking care of everyone else." I stared at him, surprised. "You switched tables? For me? If that's all right with you, I can switch back if you prefer." "No," I said quickly. "No, that's actually really nice, thank you." And it was nice, more than nice. For the first time in months of wedding planning, someone had thought about what I might need instead of what I could provide for everyone else. As we took our seats at the head table, I caught Rebecca's eye. She glanced between James and me with obvious curiosity and mouthed, "Who is that?" I mouthed back, "Tell you later," and turned my attention to the salad course. But as the dinner progressed and James and I continued talking about books, about travel, about his work with veteran support organizations, I found myself thinking that maybe there would be more to tell Rebecca than I'd expected. Dinner conversation flowed surprisingly easily. James had this way of asking questions that made me want to share more than I usually would with someone I'd just met. Not in an intrusive way, but with genuine curiosity that made me feel like my answers actually mattered. "So healthcare technology," he said, cutting into his salmon. "What got you into that specifically?" "My dad, actually. He was a nurse practitioner in a small rural clinic. I used to visit him at work sometimes when I was a kid, and I saw how much time he spent fighting with outdated computer systems instead of helping patients. He'd spend 20 minutes trying to pull up someone's medical history when it should have taken 30 seconds. That must have been frustrating to watch." It was, especially because my dad was this incredibly compassionate caregiver, but the technology was making him less effective. When I went to college, I thought I'd go into medicine like him, but I realized I could help more patients by fixing the systems that doctors and nurses rely on. James nodded thoughtfully. Systems thinking. I understand that. In the military, we talk about force multipliers. Changes that make everyone else more effective rather than just improving one person's performance. Exactly. I felt a little thrill of recognition. Most people's eyes glazed over when I talked about my work, but James seemed to genuinely get it. What about you? Marcus mentioned you served together, but what do you do now? I run a nonprofit that helps veterans transition to civilian careers. A lot of military skills translate really well to civilian jobs, but the translation process isn't always obvious. We help with resume writing, interview skills, networking, basically bridging the gap between military experience and corporate expectations. That sounds incredibly needed. It is. The unemployment rate for veterans is higher than it should be, not because they lack skills, but because they don't know how to communicate those skills in civilian terms. A squad leader has managed teams under pressure, made life-or-death decisions, and coordinated complex logistics, but their resume might just say infantry soldier. I found myself leaning forward, genuinely interested. How did you get started with that? Personal experience, mostly. When I left the military 5 years ago, I had a hell of a time figuring out what I was qualified for. I had 20 years of leadership experience, but every job posting wanted specific software knowledge or industry experience I didn't have. I eventually figured it out, but I kept thinking about all the guys and women who might not. The main course arrived, and our conversation was interrupted by the clinking of glasses and Marcus standing up to give his speech. I turned my attention to the front of the room, but I was acutely aware of James beside me, the way he listened intently to every word. 5 years ago, Marcus began, I was a guy who thought love was something that happened to other people. I had my career, my friends, my routines, and I was perfectly content with all of that. Then I met Rebecca, and she turned my perfectly organized life into beautiful chaos. The crowd laughed, and Rebecca beamed up at him from her seat. Rebecca taught me that the best things in life aren't planned, they're discovered. Like the hole-in-the-wall taco place we found when we got lost trying to find that fancy restaurant on our second date. Or the hiking trail we stumbled onto when we took a wrong turn in Colorado. Or the way she makes me laugh even when I'm stressed about work or worried about the world. I glanced at Rebecca, seeing tears in her eyes, but also pure joy on her face. So here's to beautiful chaos, Marcus continued, raising his glass. To wrong turns that lead to right places. To spilled coffee and ruined laptops. And all the little disasters that bring us exactly where we're supposed to be. Everyone raised their glasses, and I found myself thinking about wrong turns and unexpected discoveries. Like ending up at this table, talking to this man, having the kind of conversation that made me forget to check my phone or worry about whether the caterers needed anything. After Marcus sat down, it was my turn. I stood up, looking out at the sea of faces, and for a moment my mind went completely blank. I'd had a speech prepared, something safe and sweet about sisterhood and love, but suddenly it felt wrong. I've known Rebecca my whole life, I began, and I've watched her go through different phases. There was the mermaid phase when she was 6, the horse phase when she was 10, the boy band phase when she was 13 that we're all still trying to forget. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and I felt myself relax. But I've never seen her as happy as she's been since she met Marcus. Not because he completes her. Rebecca has always been complete on her own, but because he celebrates her. He loves her weird sense of humor. He encourages her terrible cooking experiments. He listens to her work stories, even though he doesn't understand half the technical terms she uses. I looked at Marcus, who was grinning and nodding. Marcus, you didn't just marry my sister. You became her best friend, her biggest supporter, and her partner in all the adventures she's been dreaming about her whole life. Rebecca, you found someone who loves you not despite your quirks, but because of them. I raised my glass. To Rebecca and Marcus. May your love story be filled with all the beautiful disasters that lead to exactly where you're meant to be. The applause was warm and genuine, and as I sat down, James leaned over. That was perfect, he said quietly. You can tell you really love her. I do. even when she drives me crazy. I paused, then decided to be honest. I was nervous about giving that speech. Public speaking isn't really my thing. You couldn't tell. You seemed completely natural up there. The band started playing, and couples began moving toward the dance floor. I watched Rebecca and Marcus have their first dance, swaying together to At Last, while their families and friends formed a circle around them. There was something magical about that moment. The way they looked at each other like they were the only two people in the room. The way the soft lighting made everything glow. The way love seemed to radiate out from them to everyone watching. "Would you like to dance?" James asked. I hesitated. I wasn't a particularly good dancer, and something about dancing with someone I'd just met felt strangely intimate. But there was something in his expression, not pushy or expectant, just hopeful, that made me nod. "I should warn you," I said as we walked to the dance floor, "I'm much better at coordinating other people's movements than my own. I'll take my chances." The band was playing something slow and jazzy, and James led me onto the floor with the kind of confidence that suggested he actually knew what he was doing. His hands settled on my waist, and I placed mine on his shoulder, suddenly hyper-aware of the contact. "You're a good dancer," I said, surprised at how easy it was to follow his lead. My mother insisted on ballroom lessons when I was 12. I thought it was torture at the time, but it turns out to be useful at events like this. We moved together easily, not talking much, just swaying to the music. I found myself relaxing into the moment in a way I hadn't expected. There was something about being held, about moving in sync with someone else, that made me feel less alone than I had in months. "Can I ask you something?" James said after a while. "Sure. Why aren't you here with someone? I mean, you're beautiful, you're obviously successful, you're funny and smart and kind. It seems impossible that you're single." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "That's quite an assumption. Maybe I just chose to come alone." "Did you?" I met his eyes, debating how honest to be. "No, Rebecca didn't give me a +1. Said they were trying to keep numbers down." His eyebrows rose. "Seriously?" "It's fine. I mean, it stung at first. But honestly, I'm having a better time than I expected. Especially now." The song ended, but neither of us moved to leave the dance floor. The band started something a little more upbeat, and James spun me out and back in with a flourish that made me laugh. "Show off," I said. "Just getting started." We danced through 3 more songs, talking and laughing between the music. James had this way of making me feel graceful, like I was a better dancer than I actually was. When a slow song came on again, he pulled me closer and I let him. "Samantha," he said, his voice low enough that I had to lean in to hear him over the music. "Yes? I'm really glad Marcus asked me to keep an eye on you tonight. Even though I clearly don't need keeping an eye on." He smiled. "Especially because of that." There was something in his tone that made my heart skip. I looked up at him, really looked, and saw something in his expression that made me suddenly nervous and excited at the same time. "James." "Ladies and gentlemen," the band leader announced, "we're going to slow things down for all the couples out there. This one goes out to Rebecca and Marcus, and to love in all its beautiful forms." The opening notes of "The Way You Look Tonight" filled the air, and James pulled me closer still. I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of his hand through the silk of my dress. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to be here with someone, really with someone, instead of just playing the role of a dutiful single sister. And then I remembered that this was just one night, just one dance, just a kind stranger making sure the maid of honor didn't spend the whole evening working. Tomorrow, we'd go back to our separate lives in different cities, and this would just be a nice memory. But as James spun me one more time and dipped me at the end of the song, making me laugh despite myself, I found myself wishing that tomorrow felt a little further away. The reception continued around us in a blur of laughter, clinking glasses, and swirling dresses. James and I had moved from the dance floor to a quieter corner of the terrace, where we'd somehow ended up deep in conversation about everything from books to travel to childhood memories. The wedding reception had become background noise to something that felt much more significant. "You mentioned you traveled for work," James said, settling back in his chair with his bourbon. What's the most interesting place a hospital upgrade has taken you? Alaska, actually. Tiny clinic in a fishing village outside Anchorage. The nearest hospital was 3 hours away by plane, weather permitting. Their computer system was from 1987, and they were still keeping patient records on paper as backup because the system crashed so often. That sounds like a nightmare to fix. It was challenging, but also incredible. The nurse practitioner there had been serving that community for 20 years. She knew every patient personally, could tell you their medical history by memory, and somehow managed to provide excellent care despite having technology that belonged in a museum. I took a sip of my wine, remembering, the day we went live with the new system, this elderly fisherman came in with chest pain. Instead of spending 20 minutes trying to access his records, she pulled up his complete cardiac history in 30 seconds. The look on her face, like we'd given her superpowers. That must be incredibly satisfying work. It is, though it means I'm on the road about half the time. Not exactly conducive to, I gestured vaguely, not sure how to finish that sentence. To relationships? To anything requiring consistency, really. Dating, friendships, even houseplants. I laughed. I've killed more succulents than I care to admit. James smiled. I understand the travel challenge. When I was active duty, I was deployed or transferred so often that I stopped buying furniture. Just lived out of boxes and duffel bags for years. Did you ever get lonely? All that moving around? He considered the question seriously. Sometimes, but I think I confused being alone with being lonely for a long time. I thought I needed to be settled, rooted somewhere, before I could build meaningful connections. It took me too long to realize that the right connections can survive geography. There was something in the way he said it that made me wonder if he was talking about more than just friendships. Before I could ask, Rebecca appeared beside our table, slightly breathless from dancing. There you are. I've been looking for you. She glanced between James and me with barely concealed curiosity. Mind if I steal my sister for a minute? Of course, James said, standing. I should probably check in with some of the other guys anyway. Samantha, save me another dance? Absolutely. Rebecca watched him walk away, then immediately grabbed my arm. Okay, Spill. Who is that gorgeous man and why haven't you mentioned him? I just met him tonight. He's Colonel James Mitchell, one of Marcus's army friends. He switched seats to sit at our table. He switched seats? Rebecca's eyes lit up. For you? Don't read too much into it, he was just being nice. Marcus asked him to make sure I wasn't working the whole time. Sam, honey, I've seen being nice, and I've seen interested. That man is definitely interested. The way he looks at you, the way he listens when you talk, the way he found excuses to keep touching your hand during dinner. You were watching us during dinner? I'm the bride, I notice everything. She sat down in James's vacated chair. What did you think of him? I found myself smiling despite my attempts to play it cool. He's really easy to talk to. Smart, funny, thoughtful. We've been talking for hours, and it doesn't feel like work, you know? Like I don't have to be entertaining or impressive, I can just be myself. That's huge for you. What do you mean? Rebecca gave me a look. Sam, you spend so much time taking care of everyone else that I sometimes forget you have needs too. You're always the one organizing, managing, solving problems. Even tonight, even at my wedding. You've been in work mode half the time. But watching you with James, you looked relaxed, happy, like you weren't performing for anyone. I felt a strange twist in my chest. I don't perform for people. You kinda do though, not in a fake way, but you always put yourself last. You make sure everyone else is comfortable before you even think about what you need. It's one of the things I love most about you, but it's also why you're still single. Rebecca? I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying that maybe it's time to let someone take care of you for a change, instead of always being the one doing the caretaking. Before I could respond, Marcus appeared, slightly tipsy and grinning. Ladies, am I interrupting something important? Just girl talk, Rebecca said, standing and smoothing her dress. What's up? Your new husband would like to dance with his beautiful wife. And also, James asked me to tell you that the band is taking requests and wanted to know if you had any favorites. Rebecca looked at me meaningfully. See? Thoughtful? As they walked away, I stayed at the table for a moment, thinking about what Rebecca had said. Was I really always performing? Always managing everyone else's needs before my own? Looking back over the evening, I realized she might have a point. Even during my conversations with James, I'd caught myself monitoring the reception, making sure everything was running smoothly, thinking about what needed to be handled next. But with James, those thoughts had started to fade into the background. For the first time in months, maybe years, I'd been present in a conversation, instead of mentally 3 steps ahead, planning and organizing and anticipating problems. The band started playing Fly Me to the Moon, and I saw James approaching with 2 fresh drinks. "Thought you might need a refill," he said, setting down a glass of wine. "Everything okay? You looked deep in thought." "Just processing some sisterly wisdom. Nothing earth-shattering." "Want to share?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Rebecca thinks I spend too much time taking care of other people and not enough time letting anyone take care of me." James sat down, studying my face. "What do you think?" "I think she might be right. I've always been the responsible one, the problem solver, the person everyone calls when they need something handled. It's who I am." "It's part of who you are," he corrected gently, "but it doesn't have to be all of who you are." "What do you mean?" "I mean that being competent and reliable are wonderful qualities, but they don't disqualify you from also being vulnerable sometimes. From letting other people contribute to your life instead of always being the one contributing to theirs." I looked at him, surprised by the insight. "Is that something you learned in the military?" "Actually, I learned it in therapy," he smiled ruefully. "After I left active duty, I had a hard time adjusting. I was used to having a clear mission, a defined role, people depending on me. In civilian life, I felt lost. My therapist helped me realize that I'd defined myself so completely by what I could do for others that I'd forgotten how to just be myself." "How long did that take to figure out?" "I'm still figuring it out. But I'm getting better at recognizing when I'm hiding behind competence, instead of actually connecting with people." The honesty in his voice made something inside me soften. "Thank you for telling me that. Thank you for listening. Most people don't want to hear about the messy parts of transition in therapy. Most people are idiots." He laughed, and the sound made me smile. "Dance with me again? I promise not to psychoanalyze you on the dance floor. I might hold you to that." But as we moved back onto the dance floor, I found myself thinking that maybe a little psychoanalysis wasn't such a bad thing, if it came from someone who seemed to see me clearly. The band was playing something slow and dreamy, and as James pulled me close, I let myself enjoy the feeling of being held without worrying about what came next. "Samantha," he said after we'd been swaying in comfortable silence for a while. "Hmm? I know this might be presumptuous, but I'm driving back to Dallas tomorrow. I know you're in Austin, which isn't exactly on the way, but if you want to grab coffee or lunch before I head home." I looked up at him, heart racing. "Are you asking me on a date, Colonel Mitchell?" "I'm asking if you'd like to spend more time together outside of wedding reception circumstances. Whether that qualifies as a date is entirely up to you." The careful way he phrased it made me smile. "I would like that, very much." "Good. Because I was prepared to embarrass myself with increasingly creative excuses to stay in Austin if you said no." "Like what?" "Well, I heard the breakfast tacos here are legendary. Might take me several days to properly research all the best places." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I know all the best breakfast taco places." "Perfect. Then it's definitely a date." As the song ended and applause filled the air, I realized that Rebecca had been right about something else too. I did look happy. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what needed to be done next or who needed taking care of. I was just here, in this moment, with this man who saw me as someone worth getting to know rather than someone whose competence could be useful. It was a revelation I wasn't quite ready to examine too closely, but as James spun me one more time under the string lights, I decided that maybe some revelations were worth the risk. The evening air had turned crisp as the reception moved into its final hours. Most of the older relatives had already departed, leaving behind the core group of friends and family who weren't quite ready to let the magic end. The band had switched to more upbeat music, and clusters of people had formed around the terrace, telling stories and sharing memories that would be funnier tomorrow than they were tonight. James and I had found ourselves at a small table near the edge of the property, where the lights from the reception faded into the natural darkness of the Texas Hill Country. We could still hear the music and laughter, but it felt removed somehow, like we were in our own private world. "I should probably start thinking about wrapping things up," I said, glancing toward where Rebecca was laughing with her college roommates. "The bride needs to get some rest before the honeymoon flight tomorrow." "Always the project manager," James observed, but his tone was warm rather than critical. "What happens after you successfully complete Project Wedding?" "Back to reality, I suppose. I have a system implementation in Phoenix starting Wednesday, then probably Seattle after that. What about you? Back to Dallas and the nonprofit?" "Actually, I'm speaking at a veterans conference in San Antonio next week. Funny how our work keeps us moving around the same general area." There was something in the way he said it that made me look at him more closely. "Are you suggesting that geography might not be as much of an obstacle as I thought?" "I'm suggesting that maybe we could figure out how to see each other again without waiting for the next wedding." Before I could respond, a commotion near the main reception area caught my attention. Someone was calling my name, and not in a casual way. I turned to see Marcus jogging toward us, looking slightly panicked. "Sam, thank God, we have a situation." I was on my feet immediately, project manager mode activated. "What's wrong?" "The transportation company just called. The shuttle that's supposed to take people back to their hotels broke down. They're saying it'll be at least 2 hours before they can get a replacement." I glanced around the reception, mentally calculating. How many people need rides? About 30. Most of the local family drove themselves, but all the out-of-town guests were counting on that shuttle. My mind was already working through solutions. Okay, do we have a list of who needs transportation and where they're staying? Are people staying at multiple hotels or all at the same place? 3 different hotels, all downtown. "Sam, I know it's your sister's wedding and you shouldn't have to deal with this, but Rebecca is starting to panic, and I have no idea how to coordinate." "It's fine," I said, already pulling out my phone. "This is what I do. James, I'm sorry, but I need to handle this." "Of course. Can I help?" I paused, looking at him. Most people would have taken that as their cue to politely disappear, but he was standing there like he genuinely wanted to be useful rather than just polite. "Actually, yes. Can you help me get a count of who needs rides and where they're going? I'll start calling ride services." For the next 45 minutes, James and I worked together like we'd been doing this for years. He moved through the crowd with quiet efficiency, gathering information and organizing people into groups by destination, while I coordinated with 3 different car services and tracked arrival times on my phone. What struck me wasn't just how helpful he was, but how he seemed to understand instinctively what needed to be done without me having to explain or manage him. When I realized we needed someone to wait outside for the first set of cars, he was already heading toward the front entrance. When I started to worry about elderly guests standing around in the cool evening air, I turned to find him setting up chairs in the lobby. "The first car should be here in 10 minutes, I announced to the waiting group. "Hotel Grand Duca guests, you'll be in the first group. Downtown Marriott in the second group, and Omni guests in the third. Everyone has my phone number if there are any issues." As the first group headed outside, Rebecca appeared beside me, looking frazzled but grateful. "Sam, you're amazing. I was so stressed about people being stranded and you just fixed it, like always." It wasn't just me. James was incredibly helpful. Rebecca glanced over to where James was helping Marcus's elderly aunt with her coat. "He's pretty wonderful, isn't he?" "He is," I admitted. "I keep waiting for the catch, you know. For him to reveal some terrible flaw or weird habit that explains why he's single." "Maybe he's single for the same reason you are, not because there's anything wrong with either of you, but because you haven't found the right person yet." The second group of cars arrived, and I spent the next few minutes making sure everyone got to the right vehicle with their belongings. When the last car pulled away, the reception had thinned considerably. Only immediate family and the closest friends remained, and the energy had shifted from party mode to the gentle exhaustion that follows a perfect day. James found me by the coat check, where I was collecting my wrap and making sure I hadn't forgotten anything. That was impressive, he said. You turned a potential disaster into a minor inconvenience. Team effort. I couldn't have managed it without your help. I noticed something while we were handling that crisis. What's that? You didn't apologize once. Not for the problem, not for having to work, not for taking time away from the party. You just saw what needed to be done and did it. I thought about that. I guess when there's a real problem to solve, I don't feel guilty about being competent. Maybe that's something to remember. Rebecca and Marcus were making their rounds, saying goodbye to the remaining guests. When they reached us, Rebecca pulled me into a long hug. Thank you for everything, Sammy, for all the planning, for tonight, for being the best sister anyone could ask for. Thank you for letting me be part of your perfect day. She pulled back, looking between James and me. Are you two? Having breakfast together tomorrow, I said quickly, before she could launch into matchmaking mode. Nothing dramatic. Breakfast can be very dramatic, Marcus said solemnly, making Rebecca laugh. Get out of here, I said, shooing them toward their car. You have a plane to catch in the morning. After they left, James and I found ourselves alone in the mansion's lobby, the sounds of the cleanup crew working in the background. The evening was officially over, and reality was starting to creep back in. I should probably head back to my hotel, I said, though I didn't particularly want to. Me too, early flight tomorrow, he paused. About breakfast. Are you having second thoughts? No, quite the opposite. I'm wondering if we could make it lunch instead. Give us more time to talk. Something warm unfurled in my chest. I'd like that. Good. I'll pick you up at 11. Perfect. We walked outside together, where the valet was bringing cars around for the last few guests. The night air smelled like jasmine and possibility, and I found myself reluctant to get in my car and drive away. Samantha, James said, and something in his tone made me turn toward him. Yes? Thank you for tonight. I know you didn't choose to be here alone, but I'm really glad you were. Thank you for making sure I wasn't actually alone. He stepped closer, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he reached for my hand, brought it to his lips, and pressed a gentle kiss to my knuckles. It was old-fashioned and slightly formal, but somehow more romantic than any kiss goodnight I'd ever received. Until tomorrow, he said. Until tomorrow. Bis. I drove home through the empty Austin streets, replaying the evening in my mind. 12 hours ago, I'd been dreading this wedding, feeling sorry for myself about the missing +1, and anticipating a long night of playing the dutiful single sister. Instead, I'd spent one of the most enjoyable evenings I could remember with someone who seemed to see past all my careful competence to something more interesting underneath. As I got ready for bed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. Rebecca had been right. I did look happy. There was something different in my expression, something softer and more open than I was used to seeing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for a wonderful evening. Looking forward to hearing more about those legendary breakfast tacos. James? I smiled, typing back. Thank you for making a potentially difficult night into something special. Sleep well. His response came quickly. Sweet dreams, Samantha. I set the phone aside and climbed into bed, but sleep was elusive. My mind kept drifting back to the way James had listened when I talked. The way he'd stepped in to help without being asked. The way he'd made me feel like someone worth knowing rather than just someone useful to have around. Maybe Rebecca had been right about more than just my tendency to take care of everyone else. Maybe I had been waiting for the right person all along, and maybe the right person was someone who could see past my competence to the woman underneath who was tired of always being the one holding everything together. Tomorrow would bring lunch and conversation, and the chance to see if what had felt so natural and easy tonight could survive outside the magical bubble of a wedding reception. But lying there in the dark, I found myself hopeful in a way I hadn't been in years. Sometimes the best things really did come from beautiful disasters, like a missing +1 that led to meeting someone who made you remember what it felt like to be excited about tomorrow. I woke up the next morning with sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows, and the kind of nervous energy that comes with anticipating something you're not entirely sure how to categorize. Was this a date? A friendly continuation of wedding conversation? An elaborate way for both of us to avoid the awkwardness of pretending last night hadn't happened? My phone showed 2 messages. One from Rebecca, sent from the airport. Thank you again for everything. Can't wait to hear about breakfast with the mysterious Colonel. The other from James. Good morning. Still on for lunch? I found a place that claims to have the best breakfast tacos in Austin, which seems like a bold claim that requires investigation. I found myself smiling as I typed it back. Very bold indeed. I'll be ready at 11. Fair warning, I take breakfast taco research seriously. I wouldn't expect anything less from someone who upgrades hospital computer systems for a living. See you soon. I spent longer getting ready than I normally would for a casual lunch, changing clothes twice before settling on jeans and a soft blue sweater that Rebecca always said brought out my eyes. Not too dressy, not too casual, not trying too hard, but still making an effort. The delicate balance of Sunday lunch with someone you'd like to see again. James arrived exactly at 11, looking comfortable in khakis and a button-down shirt, like someone who knew how to dress for various occasions without overthinking it. He was driving a sensible SUV that somehow managed to be both practical and stylish, which felt appropriate for everything I'd learned about him so far. So, he said as I buckled my seatbelt, where does one go for scientifically rigorous breakfast taco evaluation? East Austin. There's a place called Valentina's that's been around forever, and a newer spot called Suerte that's getting a lot of attention. We could try both and compare notes. I like your methodology. The drive to East Austin gave us a chance to talk without the background noise and social obligations of the wedding reception. In daylight, our conversation felt different. Still easy, but with an underlying awareness that we were choosing to spend time together rather than being thrown together by circumstance. Can I ask you something that might be too personal? James said as we waited at a red light. You can ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Last night, when you were handling the transportation crisis, you seemed completely in your element. But earlier, during the more social parts of the evening, you looked like you were working harder. Do you prefer solving problems to just enjoying yourself? I considered the question seriously. I think I trust myself more when there's a clear problem to solve. Social situations feel more ambiguous. With a crisis, I know what success looks like. With small talk and socializing, I'm never quite sure if I'm doing it right. What would doing it right look like? I don't know, being charming, entertaining, making everyone feel comfortable and included? I paused. Actually, now that I say it out loud, that sounds exhausting. It does. What if the goal was just to be yourself and see who responds to that? That sounds terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. We pulled into the parking lot at Valentina's, a converted Airstream trailer surrounded by picnic tables and string lights. The smell of barbacoa and fresh tortillas filled the air, and there was already a line of locals who clearly knew something the tourists didn't. This looks promising, James said, surveying the scene. The line is always a good sign. Fair warning, breakfast tacos are serious business in Austin. People have strong opinions. We ordered an assortment, barbacoa, chorizo and egg, migas and bean and cheese, and found a table under the oak trees. The first bite confirmed what I already knew. Valentina's didn't mess around. Okay, James said, his expression serious as he evaluated the barbacoa taco. I understand now why you take this seriously. This is exceptional. Right? The tortillas are made fresh every morning, and they've been using the same barbacoa recipe for 30 years. We ate and talked, comparing tacos and debating the merits of different salsas. But underneath the food conversation, we were really getting to know each other. James told me about growing up in a military family, moving every few years, learning to adapt quickly to new places and people. I told him about the pressure of being the older sister, the one everyone expected to have everything figured out. Did you always want to be in the military? I asked. From the time I was 8 years old. My dad was a career Army, and I thought that was what men did. Served their country, led soldiers, made a difference in the world. It took me a long time to realize there were other ways to serve and lead. Do you miss it? Some parts. I miss the clarity of mission, the brotherhood, the sense that what you were doing mattered. But I don't miss the constant deployments or the toll it took on relationships. Is that why you never married? The deployments? He was quiet for a moment, and I worried I'd overstepped. Partly, but mostly because I spent so many years defining myself by my rank and my role that I forgot how to just be James. When you're Colonel Mitchell all the time, it's hard to figure out who you are when you take the uniform off. And now? Now I'm learning. Therapy helps. So does work that feels meaningful but isn't all-consuming. And conversations like this one, where I get to be curious about someone else instead of always being the one with the answers. After we finished at Valentina's, I suggested we walk through the nearby farmers market. The November afternoon was perfect for wandering. Warm sun, cool breeze, the kind of weather that makes you want to stay outside all day. We strolled between vendors selling everything from handmade soap to artisanal honey, not really shopping but enjoying the excuse to keep talking. At a booth selling vintage books, James picked up a worn copy of All the Light We Cannot See. "Have you read this?" he asked. 3 times. It's one of my favorites. Mine too. There's something about the way it handles connections across distances that resonates with me. The radio scenes, I said, understanding immediately. 2 people finding each other through the static. Exactly. He bought the book, though he mentioned he already owned a copy, and I found myself wondering if he was creating an excuse to think about our conversation later. As the afternoon stretched on, we found ourselves at Zilker Park, sitting on a blanket James had produced from his car. Always prepared, he'd said with a smile. The park was full of Sunday afternoon energy. Families with dogs, couples throwing frisbees, musicians practicing under the trees. "Can I tell you something?" I said, watching a couple nearby teaching their toddler to walk. "Of course." I haven't had a conversation like this in, I can't remember how long, where I'm not thinking about what I should say next or how to steer things in a certain direction, it's just happening. I know what you mean. Usually I'm very aware of managing conversations, especially with people I don't know well. Making sure the other person is comfortable, finding common ground, avoiding topics that might be sensitive. But not today. Not today. Today feels like talking to someone I've known for years, even though we just met 12 hours ago. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I knew this perfect afternoon would have to end eventually, but I wasn't ready for it to be over. "James," I said, turning to face him on the blanket. "Yes? What happens now? I mean, you live in Dallas, I live here, we both travel constantly for work, even if we wanted to see each other again. Do you want to see me again?" The directness of the question caught me off guard, but I appreciated it. "Yes, very much." "Then we'll figure it out." I don't have all the answers, Samantha, but I know that what happened last night and today doesn't feel like something that should end, just because it's complicated. "You're not worried about the logistics?" "I'm terrified of the logistics," he said, laughing. "But I'm more terrified of walking away from this because it might be difficult." As we packed up the blanket and walked back to his car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine excitement about the unknown. Not anxiety about planning and controlling outcomes, but anticipation about discovering what might be possible. "So," James said as we drove back to my apartment, "I have a conference in San Antonio next weekend. It's only an hour and a half from here. Are you asking if I'd like to have dinner next Saturday?" "I'm asking if you'd like to spend Saturday evening with someone who's very interested in continuing this conversation." "I would like that very much." When he walked me to my door, we stood there for a moment in the gathering dusk, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. "Thank you," I said, "for yesterday, for today, for making me remember what it feels like to just enjoy someone's company without worrying about what comes next. Thank you for showing me what I've been missing by always trying to have everything figured out before I take the first step." This time, when he leaned in to kiss me, I didn't think about what it meant or where it might lead. I just kissed him back, tasting possibility and hope, and the sweet uncertainty of something beginning. When we finally broke apart, James smiled and said, "Until next weekend." Until next weekend. As I watched him drive away, I realized that Rebecca had been right about beautiful disasters leading to exactly where you're supposed to be. My sister's wedding had denied me a +1, but it had given me something much more valuable. The chance to meet someone who saw me clearly and liked what he saw. Someone who made me want to be brave enough to find out what might happen if I stopped managing every outcome and started trusting the process instead. Sometimes the best stories begin not with having everything figured out, but with being willing to write the next chapter without knowing how it ends. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.